So welcome back to So Forth and So On. I'm Miss Henderson, and as I mentioned in the previous video, I am working on a community service quilt with my sewing students, and so I'm creating blocks that will go along with the blocks that my students created so that we can make a larger quilt that we will donate to a charitable organization. We've already identified an organization, and once the quilt is completed, I will reveal that organization. I'm not sure if they know already that they are the recipients, so I'm going to hold off on talking about it. But the last video, I pressed all the fabric and I cut all the fabric to the 5-inch squares, and I cut, I think it was 6 fabrics all at one time. So today I'm going to go ahead and cut the fabric again to what I needed to do, and I'm also going to sew some blocks together, and I hope that you will find this sew along or this tutorial useful. Thank you for watching. So I'm going to aim the camera at my cutting mat. I have my cutting mat and my sewing machine set up here. So as I mentioned, the last time we cut a stack of 5-inch squares. So from that, I use my ruler to cut that stack of squares in half, and now I end up with half square triangles. So let's go ahead and do that with this one. I did that with the solids, and now I'm going to do that with one of the prints as well. So let's see if we can get this in the camera where you can see. And again, I always use the cutting mat and ruler as a guide because it has a grid, and I can get things cut properly. Now, sometimes you can use your ruler going diagonally on your fabric, and then you can draw a line and sew on either side of the line. That's very helpful. But for this, because I'm going to use the triangles to go around the block, I don't need to exactly draw the line as long as my ruler is directly diagonal center. So now I have 2 sets of half square triangles that I'm going to use with this particular block here. So let's get to it. For the first one, the solids, I have my 2 solids here. I'm going to put them right sides together. And I'm just going to sew a 1/4-inch seam along. So I have them together, and I'm just going to sew a 1/4-inch seam along the long side. I'm using a straight stitch, and I'm set at 2.5. Cut that off. And I'm using a grayish thread so that I'm not worrying about changing threads throughout the project. So now what you want to do, and once I start doing the whole project, I will do chain piecing, but right now I'm just going to show you this for demonstration. You just want to give it a press to set that seam. And then when you open it, you're going to press toward the darker shade. If you notice, I'm not rubbing the iron around. I'm not ironing this time, I'm pressing. So it's just up and down. so that I don't change the shape of my square. So now there's that square. So now what we want to do is I have my 4 pieces from the printed fabric here. I'm going to take one of the triangles, and like with this square you want to find the center of it. So fold it directly in half. I'm not worrying about the dog ears to cut off right now. You can cut those off, but I'm not going to do it right now. Find the center of that square. Don't press it in, just finger press it because we don't want it to stay there. And then take your triangle and fold it in half. And this is just until you can eyeball it very well. And press that in half. This is how you find the center if you're trying to match up centers of pretty much anything. So now you have that crease there and the crease in the other part. If you match up those creases, then you have a direct center. You've centered one item with the other. Another way is to make sure the point of your triangle is on that center line as well. So if you get that matched up, you're pretty good. And you can stick a pin in it. And then we do the same thing on the other side. Make that fold, lining that up, then find your center, match those folds together, those center folds. Making sure your point is on that fold line as well. And then place a pin in there. And what you're going to do is sew along this side, the long side, and sew along this side. Okay, so we'll sew along. Clip your thread. Use your iron to set the seam. And then you're going to turn and press one of the triangles back. And the other one, you're going to fold it back and press it back as well. Give it a little steam. Okay. So far, this is what we have. Then we're going to take the other 2 triangles and do the same thing on the other sides of that square. Match them up, center them, put a pin in to hold them there. Go over to your sewing machine and stitch down those sides just like you did the previous side. So I've gone ahead and sewn a few of the blocks together. This is the first one. That's one block there. And I've already squared this one up, so it's ready to go. This is another one that I did. And it needs to be squared up, so that's what we will go ahead and do now. Now, I want to show you before we go any further. The seams on the back are pressed toward the dark. So when I open those out, after I sew them on across on the edges, when I open it, I press the seams toward the dark. Always press toward the dark. On this one, I press outward because, again, I press toward the darker. So that's just something to keep in mind. But this one here, we need to clean it up. And I want to use my real scissors here. And these are the dog ears from the triangles that I'm just snipping off right here to get rid of that extra bulk. And just be careful you don't cut into your stitching. But those little flaps that were hanging off, just trim those right off. And you can do this as you sew and as you go along. I just didn't. So now that's clear there. Alright, now we can go ahead and square up. Okay, so we make sure it's nice and flat. We get us a grid on our cutting mat. And we line one edge up. And we use our ruler and our rotary cutter. And you can see where this edge is not even, so we want to go to the shortest portion of that, line up with a part or a grid, a line on our cutting mat on the grid here, and just use a rotary cutter, clean that up straighter. And if you find that it's still a little bit, because I see a little bit still, and you may find that, just go back in and line that point up where it's hanging off a little bit extra. Line it up with your line, and then line up your ruler with that, and then go from there. Now we have a straight edge. You'll do that to all four sides. And then you'll put it aside and start with the next one. So I have a bunch more of these blocks to make. I hope you enjoyed learning how to make the block, and I hope you enjoyed the journey with me for this community service quilt that my sewing students and I are making together. We're collaborating. Wonderful, wonderful. So thank you for joining me here at Sew Forth and Sew On. I am Miss Henderson, and I really appreciate you stopping by. Please be sure to like this video if you indeed liked the content. Also, consider subscribing to my channel and share with your friends. I really appreciate it. I also welcome your comments in the comment section below. Thank you so much, and have a grand day, and continue to sew forth and sew on. Amen.